good morning, everybody, and welcome to yet again another lesson with the Buck Skill Show. I can see that the Sir Thomas Fremantle School is in, and I know that we've done some lessons with you already, so some of the students here may have been in some of our other lessons, but this morning's lesson is music. As you probably already know, it's not about me, so I'm going to hand over to Paul, and Paul's going to introduce what we're going to hear from this morning and who we're going to hear from. So good morning, Paul. Welcome.
Morning, Max. Thanks very much. My name is Paul Gano, and I'm the Director of Music at Bucks Music Trust. Good morning, all you Year 9s out there who are interested in music. And what we've managed to bring to this lesson today is someone who works as a composer and music producer, Will Farmer, who is an Aylesbury boy originally, but I'll let him tell you a bit more about himself. And just to say, in terms of Bucks Music Trust, we're here to support young people and schools across Buckinghamshire. So if when you've seen this, you're even more interested about in finding out more about music production and those sorts of things, do get in touch with us either through our website, or your head of music has my email contact details. I'm very happy to deal with any queries that you might have and try and get you into some other programs to do with this sort of thing. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Will, who run this session.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be able to speak to all you this morning. I'm Will Farmer. I'm a composer. I write music for a variety of different mediums. So I've got some music for radio, podcasts, some short films, animations, basically anything where you're not just writing music for the sake of music. You're writing it to be a companion to something, or to complement a product, for instance, in terms of library music. So a bit about me. As Paul mentioned, I was born in Buckinghamshire, grew up in Aylesbury. I went to Aylesbury Grammar School and did all my education throughout Aylesbury. I was a bit involved in some ways with the music centre as well. In some of the early days, a lot of my friends were part of that. And I did some accompanying and bits and bobs for that. So I guess a musical background for me. I started playing piano when I was roughly 4 or 5, mainly because I tried to play recorder first and my hands were too small. So the teacher suggested taking up a different instrument instead, and one that was probably slightly less shrill in terms of sound. And then I kind of continued from there through school, did some bands, all of that kind of thing. Picked up jazz piano along the way, clarinet, saxophone, some other instruments, and kind of learned jazz through no particular lessons, but just by enjoying it and doing lots of popular music and things. I did GCSE music and then A-level music, and also an EPQ in music, which is, I guess, as Year 9, you'll be at the point now where you've either selected your GCSE options, or you're certainly moving into that choice. One thing I'll say even at this point is, initially, I very nearly didn't do music GCSE, and that was because I was scared of taking it, I think, because there's sometimes a stigma around doing art subjects. But my mum actually persuaded me. I think she probably didn't want me to waste all the piano lessons that I'd taken. And I'm so glad I did, because without doing sort of this basis education that comes from GCSE things, I probably wouldn't have selected to go and study music further and also do plenty of other kind of music things. So I guess just the end of the About Me section would be kind of some of the more miscellaneous music stuff I've done, which was I freelance as a session musician, so playing piano and other things for other people's recordings, or doing orchestrations, so arranging the music, and also music preparation, which is a big part of the music industry, where you're making the sheet music for people to play. So all this to say, don't have to pigeonhole yourself at any point. My main role is a composer, but that doesn't mean you can't do other things related to that. Music is such a multifaceted area that you can kind of get involved with lots of things without having to stick to one area. So I guess I've spoken for a while already, so I think I'll move on to showing you some things I've done. So like I suggested, they're all written for different things. And when you're writing music for different media, the different function of the music is very, very important. When you're writing music for yourself, you can write whatever you want. You can express yourself however you feel is the most appropriate. However, when you're collaborating with somebody who's hopefully paying you money to write things, but also it's their creative vision that is bringing together lots of different people with skills in very particular areas, collaboration is absolutely very important. So you've got to create what they want. And whether you like that is somewhat a little bit irrelevant at points when you're writing media music. You've got to, obviously you need to use your skills to make something that sounds good, but you've also got to write exactly what it is the producer on the show is after. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which gives the answers here. So the first piece you heard was Rituals, which was underscore for a documentary sequence. It was kind of a mystic scene. So that goes all the way across, as you can see, to documentary. The second one was a piece called Ava, which is an animation that's coming out either end of this year or in January. So that was the trailer music. So that had some of the sound effects over at the beginning. So that's the thing you have to be careful. It's always never just the music. You're normally going to have some sort of other sound you're competing with. And competing is really a poor word to choose there. You should be complementing each other as much as anything. Essential Voices was the third one, EV, Essential Voices. That was a series that was broadcast over the summer on Magic Radio every day for 6 weeks. I wrote, I think, about 50 different variations of that track with different levels of intensity. And it was coronavirus key workers talking about their experience at 12 every day, discussing for exactly a minute what they were doing. And it was just a lovely spotlight during a time of crisis, pretty much, about what people were doing differently. So there was 50 variations of that simply because we didn't want the same music over and over. And also some stories were uplifting, but some of them were a little more sad. So you need to have a balance there. The third one was a game called Normatia. That was the big drums. And that was written for a video game that's coming out at the beginning of next year. So these are little sneak previews. And then the final one was a podcast. It was called Sleeping with David Baddiel. He suffers from insomnia. And this went out on Audible. It was a 6-part series. And it's lo-fi hip hop, which is certainly an area I didn't see myself writing in particularly before. I do jazz piano, so that's kind of similar. But this is what I'm saying in terms of you write what's needed. So I didn't know how to write lo-fi hip hop necessarily, but you learn those skills through basis of things you either learn at your education or you look it up and research it yourself. And eventually, if you say yes to enough things, you gain enough skills to be able to adapt into different areas. So that was the answer to those. Now, quickly, I'm going to show you a logic file for the Rituals piece. So I'll pull this up here. Hopefully you can all see that. If you could give me a thumbs up, maybe if you can see that. Yeah, cool. So what we have here is the music for the very first clip I just showed you in terms of audio. I've had to take out the video just due to copyright things, but this is how it all breaks down when you're on Logic. So for those of you who might not have used software like this before, this is called a DAW, D-A-W, which is a digital audio workstation. This is effectively like a massive tape recorder for lots and lots of different music, and then you layer it all on top of each other. And what makes this special is you can sync it to music, but you can also choose lots of virtual instruments, and you can also record things in. So for instance, I will show you this end cue here, which is written for somebody who was walking at the end of the show. They're walking into the distance, into the sunset. So what we have here, I'm just gonna make it a little bit bigger so we can see. So these lines across here are called MIDI. And what this is a special type of data that is associated with, you link it to instruments and then it will play a sound. So it's basically you're putting in computer data, it's associating it to a sound that's been recorded elsewhere, then it plays out in sequence, which gives the impression of real life people playing your music if you've got good enough samples. So in this, this is to show you a variety of things. Firstly, neat workflow is really important when you're writing music things. You're not just a composer, you're also working in admin and all the things as a self-employed person. So just like saving work for yourself is very helpful. Anyway, that boring stuff aside, this is all MIDI data. So I'll play a little bit. This is some of the synths that you'd hear over the top. So that is MIDI. And then we have piano and strings here as well, which are also MIDI. So none of this was actually recorded in real life. This is using software. But my advice to anybody who's getting out and started in writing music is to try and use your skills as much as you can. What makes you unique is what's going to set you apart from other people. So for instance, I should have got it out earlier, but I've got a bass recorder from back when I started learning recorder and then got switched to piano. So I still use that today. And that's what's making the specific sounds over the top that are a bit more unique. So those sounds are really what give you something different that stands aside from everybody else. So I would say embrace everything you can do with the computer, but also maybe do stuff that is a little bit unexpected, maybe even out of your own comfort zone. And that should give you a unique sound, which you need to set you aside sometimes in the music industry. I will jump off of Logic quickly because I want to make sure there's enough time for questions at the end. And I'll jump back onto the preview here. If I talk it through, it seems more legitimate, sorry. So just a final bit of discussion, I guess, about me before I take some questions. Qualifications in a career path. You've probably heard in music, there is no one way to get into something. Everybody has a different story, but what you can do is maximize your chances. One thing I was consistently told is that you need to be lucky to get into music. This is somewhat true, but also completely poor advice, because what you need to do is put yourself in the position to be lucky. Luck doesn't happen in terms of you're not going to be sitting in your bedroom making music like I was for years. This didn't like magically appear in terms of jobs. What you need to do is reach out to as many people as possible to put yourself in the position where you can then be lucky. It's somewhat chance whether somebody will take the first risk on you, and that can take a couple of years like it did for me. But what you need to do is make sure you've done the groundwork, so when somebody does want to take a chance, you're the person they're going to take a chance on. So in terms of qualifications, GCSE music, A-level music, they gave me the base skills to be able to go on and do my degree, which I did an undergrad at Royal Holloway for 3 years in music. And then I did a master's in composing for film and TV. So I deliberately made choices to get qualifications, but those qualifications alone didn't get me any work. It was reaching out to people and trying my best to make connections and to be a nice person, which brings me on to the second thing, which is in terms of important skills and qualities for this area of work, musical ability is obviously key, as is compositional ideas, but equally important to that are personal skills. This is a collaboration business. I'm speaking specifically here about composing for media. You're working as a team. You may be alone in making the music, but what you're working on is something bigger than just the music. You maybe, if it's a massive BBC thing, you'll get the soundtrack released afterwards. But in most things you do, the music is there to complement somebody else's vision. And once you make peace with that and realize your music isn't there to be the spotlight, it's actually quite exciting because you're suddenly working as part of a team, which is something that feels quite unusual sometimes when you're composing music. You get it a lot when you're playing, but when you're composing, sometimes it can feel a bit solitary. So you've got to have personal skills, but you've also got to respect others. So you can't email somebody and expect them to email you back straight away. You know, I would say for every 50 emails I sent out, maybe get 2 responses from composers, because they're busy people and everybody is living their own lives, doing their own thing. Just because they haven't responded doesn't mean they didn't like what you did. It just means they've probably forgotten or got a massive project with a huge deadline. Even now with people I'm working on projects with, they won't respond to my emails and I'm part of the project. You need to give them like a nod, just because people get distracted with so much stuff in the arts. But that doesn't mean you should stop trying. That just means carry on and eventually somebody will come back to you. Branding as well. Remember to push yourself out there, but in a respectful way. You've got to make sure that people want to work with you. And remember that it's a fun industry. Like, I'm talking about all these details here, but it's enjoyable. You get to make music every day, which is really, really fun, you know. And even if you're not working on a project, the way to get into it is make music. People won't hire you to do something if you haven't already made music. I've got a backlog of stuff I did for 3 or 4 years before getting specific work. This was during my A-levels and the first couple of years of my undergrad. You've got to just, if you don't enjoy it then, you're probably not going to enjoy it as a job. So it's worth doing just for that thing. But what you need to do, and this links to a range of entry routes into the industry, is make sure when you get there, what you can provide is an industry standard service. So use this time to practice. Like, you want to use your GCSE years and your A-level years to experiment. Make the mistakes now so that when you get to the industry, you know what's going to happen, you know what's going to come. And make sure you're excited about what you're doing as well. As much as music is writing projects for other people, you want to be sure to enjoy and make sure what you're writing means something, even if it's not what you like. It means something to you. You don't want to be just churning out things that aren't good. So in summary, I'd say in terms of range of entry routes into the industry, the best chance you can give yourself is writing loads and loads of music for yourself, discovering your own style, enjoying it along the way so you know what projects you want to do. But that will give you the basis to, when you do reach out to people, say, hey, here's some stuff I've already done. Do you want to have a listen to this? Maybe if this is what you'd like, there's a chance for us to collaborate along the line. So I would say that's my kind of main thing. And also don't panic. Work will come eventually. It might take a while, but if you stick at it and be true to your individual style, find your niche, but also be prepared to write what other people want, I would say that's your kind of best bet. And I'm going to check the time now because I've definitely been talking for ages. So I'll take some questions.
You're doing good with time. Well, and there's some great advice in there. Actually, it's really interesting to see the stuff that you showed us and heard. In the competition, I can tell you I got 2 out of 5. So I didn't do too great. I know that Fremantle, their class got 3 out of 5, which is really good. And it was interesting to hear those differences. But for some of those students and maybe teachers that have been in some of our other sessions, Will touched upon it again. And I think we can call it resilience, about that that ability to keep going. You have to keep trying. You don't give up easily on the things that you want. Nothing comes easily. It's not going to happen first time or second time. You have to keep asking the question. You have to keep pushing. But it's about believing in yourself. It's about practicing, and it's about doing the research and being confident in what you are capable of. I've got some questions. So guys, those of you in the classrooms, think about questions that you've got for Will. Okay, and put them in the chat box or the Q&A box. In the meantime, I have got a couple of questions that were sent in previously, which I'm going to ask Will first. Well, actually, no. Let's go with Ruth has asked a question. Do you work with live musicians or mostly synthesized music?
Oh, that's a good question. The optimum is always with live musicians. However, that depends on budget, because musicians are very, very skilled people who play live. It's their whole career. So I'm very determined that if I'm going to use a live musician, I will pay them the correct rate. So that means what I might do is, like with the breakdown I showed you, that's 80% maybe MIDI. And then I'll pay, in this case, one of my housemates who's a professional singer, the correct rate for her to perform. Because it's the same way you wouldn't, as a composer, want to be undercharging. I want to make sure I respect what they've learned. So the answer to your question is, I would mainly probably work with synthesized music at the moment. However, that's only because of budget restraints. On projects, so a few of the games that are coming up, they have bigger budgets, so we can record musicians. But that's not to say you can't make synthesized music sound like live musicians. You can probably get there, but you want to pay people for their skill, and you want to be able to grasp live musicians if at all possible.
Brilliant. I mean, so we've got 6 minutes. Well, we've got some really good questions coming through here. So let's get through them now. What equipment would you recommend to start writing your own music? And the students would also like to know what the most famous thing you have worked on was. And I'll add into that, if you're allowed to let us know, the games that you have referenced that you have been working on, are we allowed to know what games they are and who they're for?
So to recommend for starting writing your own music, you really don't need a huge amount. I started off with Audacity, which I don't know if it's still a thing that's being used, but it's free. Go download it at home. It does the same thing as Logic on a smaller basis. If you have a Mac, use an educational discount and buy Logic. It is quite expensive. It's £100, but it will pay for itself eventually. And I know that's quite a big purchase, but it is worth it. If you're on Windows, I'd suggest Cubase or Ableton, which I think Ableton Lite might be free. Basically, use whatever you can, and you'll be able to make music all the same. The software doesn't matter as much as the music you're making. The most famous thing I've worked on, well, I should add, I'm only 22, so I haven't worked on much famous stuff. Probably the stuff that was not yet. The stuff that was on radio was probably the biggest thing, because that was listened to by about 2 million people a hit, and that happened for 6 weeks. So that was quite cool. And in terms of the games, they'll be out on Steam. They're indie games. They're not huge games, but one will be called, the one you listened to was called Normatia. And so that will be out on Steam in January, I think, if you want to play that.
Interesting. So a couple of questions that we've got in, and
You're welcome.
please keep putting them in the chat box if you have them. And this is probably quite a big one. What other jobs could you do in the music industry? I mean, let's be honest, the music industry is huge, and you've given us an insight into different types of music when you think about radio, television, podcasts, trailers, documentaries, games. Music is used in so many things across the world. It really is so important. So what other jobs are there in the music industry that you could do?
Well, from personal experience, I'll tell you the jobs I've done to get to this point. It include music things from orchestrating and arranging. So that's making, like I mentioned, other people's arrangements for playing, recording for other people, studio setup, other jobs I do. So up until we were chucked into lockdown, I play piano as well in hotels. So I work at the Dorchester in London. I play background piano there for a couple of hours a week, and that keeps me playing. And it's fun to do, working in bands and groups for events. And one thing you might not think about is, but working backstage for music events. So I also, at the start of my career, how I actually met the first person who gave me a job, I was working as a runner, which is basically somebody who does all the loose jobs on a production at a few events at the Albert Hall and at the Palladium for radio stuff. I badgered the manager enough to listen to my music, which is where my first job came from. But up until that point, I was getting involved in music in the exciting way of not necessarily playing, but just being around it, being the person who set things up and made things actually work is a perfect way in as well.
That's fantastic. And I can also tell you, I mean, slightly different, but a friend of mine is a sound engineer, and he got into that pretty much by what Will was saying, was about being around music all the time, learning about it, playing with it, practicing with it, and then he just got better and better at it. And over the last few years, we're slightly older, we're approaching our 40s, but he now tours the world with many different musicians, big ones, little ones, works in studios, does shows in nightclubs. He does many things. So the music industry is huge, which leads to another question. What is the hardest part of being a musician?
The hardest part, for me personally, being brutally honest, is currently the insecurity. It's a bit scary being in music at the moment. Things are a bit crazy. But back in times when work was more forthcoming, I would say the scariest thing was initially the fear of being judged for your music. But then you've got to, once you overcome that and realize what you're making, as long as you're happy with it, that means somebody else is going to be happy with it. There's always going to be somebody who writes on your music that you don't like it. On some of the reviews for some podcasts I've done, there'll be like 90 people saying, oh, we really love the podcast. And there'll be one person going, oh, that music sounded like elevator music. It ruined everything. There's always going to be somebody who says that. So the hardest thing at the beginning was kind of getting over that fear that people are going to judge you and not like what you do. And once you realize that it doesn't really matter if people don't like it, that's the kind of thing. Yeah.
That's a really important point. And I don't know how many students, if any, were in our French lesson yesterday, and we were talking about how to get confidence in speaking another language. And it related back to the same point. You just have to get out there and speak it. And I think with what Will is saying with music, you just have to get out there and write it and put it out there. There will always be somebody who has, people will always have opinions. There will always be people that like what you do, and there will always be people that don't like what you do. But you can't let those that don't like what you do stop you from doing it, because that's how you only get better, and you have to keep going. You have to have the confidence to know that what you like, what you've produced. If other people like it, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, if other people like it, it's a bonus, right?
Absolutely, that's a benefit. But also, I just want to add something that I don't think I touched on earlier quickly, which is that it's absolutely okay to have no idea what you want to do in music. I didn't know, I had abstract ideas of being a composer. It wasn't until the second year of my degree, I was like, I'm going to try and do this properly hard and be a composer. It's absolutely okay to not be sure right now if you want to study music, but the only way you're going to find out is by doing it a bit and finding out. If I hadn't been persuaded by my mum to take GCSE music, I probably wouldn't be sat here right now talking about random games and things like that, you know? So to anybody who's sitting there thinking, oh, I don't know whether I want to do music, or I don't know if I'm good enough to do music, absolutely have a go either way. It's the only way you're going to find out is by doing it and embracing the things that the Music Centre and Bucks Music has to offer, and also getting out there and doing things on your own as well.
and the more you do these things, the more avenues will open up to you, because the more you see, the more people you meet in those industries, and the more you discover, and it will help shape your path. That's with anything in life. Will has said he's only 22 years old. That is still very young, and his career will change. I'm a lot older. My career has changed because I've done things and then found other new things related to it that has sent me forward. I'm aware there is 10:45. I'm going to say that Paul has kindly put in a message in the chat box for us that if you do want any more advice, or you want to find out about other opportunities in all kinds of music, including production and songwriting in Bucks, contact him on director@bucksmusic.org or visit www.bucksmusic.org. One last question, Will.
Yep.
Who's your favorite composer?
Oh, don't give me that. Oh no. We'll be here
You've got
for
15
hours.
seconds.
15 seconds?
Yeah.
Oh, it's either Snarky Puppy, who are a funk group, or it's Bark, one of the two, or John Williams. Don't ask me that.
There you go.
You should have told me that in advance.
No, because then you'd have taken too long to think about. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Will, for presenting that. It's been really great. I hope the students have enjoyed it. I'm sure they have. There's lots of thank yous in the chat already.
Oh, you're all welcome.
Paul, thank you very much as well for the intro. So yes, I'm going to stop the recording now and let all the students get back to their lessons and for the rest of their day. Enjoy it, guys. I'm sure I'll see some of them on other lessons, but thank you very much for coming along today and presenting to us. We really appreciate that.
No problem. Lovely to see you all. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.